I am not a radio guy. I am a dockyard communications operator. I sit in a concrete building that was designed to survive an earthquake and a fire. My job used to be boring in a way I liked. Ship traffic, tug assignments, pilot calls, weather updates, container yard coordination, spill reports, security notifications when some idiot hopped the fence. I kept logs. I kept the lines clear. I kept my mouth shut and my head down. Now I am the last person in this building who can still talk to the outside world in any clean way. And I'm doing it because the phones went weird, the cell towers got jammed, and the official channels went quiet one by one. I am doing it because I can hear things moving in the dark outside sometimes, and I do not want to die without leaving a record that any regular person can understand. If you are hoping for a clean explanation, I do not have one. I have what I saw, I have what I heard, I have what I logged. I have what 3 other people told me in their own voices while they were trying to stay alive. That is it. The first time I heard the word xenomorph out loud was not from a scientist. It was from a longshore guy named Kenny who had too much caffeine and not enough sleep and kept scrolling old movie clips on his phone during lunch. Kenny said, "Man, if it ever comes down to this, I am not getting cocooned." I told him to shut up because he was making the new security guard nervous. I thought it was a joke. 2 days later, Kenny was gone. The security guard was gone. Half the night shift was gone. The joke stopped. This started at the quarantine pier. I am not going to give you a company name. I do not know which names are safe to say, and at this point I do not care about lawsuits. I care about staying alive and getting the truth out. The quarantine operation was set up near the water where a specific kind of cargo could be offloaded without going through the normal container flow. The paperwork called it biological specimen transport. The procedures said no public contact. The security posture was heavier than anything I have seen outside a presidential visit. You have to understand something about ports. A port is not a single gate and a single fence. It is miles of fence. It is hundreds of cameras. It is thousands of places to hide. It is cranes and stacks of steel boxes and shadows between chassis rows and storm drains that go places nobody remembers. It is noise all day, then pockets of quiet at night where every sound travels. It is a place built for moving things fast, not for keeping something contained. The off-world part is what people keep getting hung up on. I get it. It sounds insane. I would call it insane if I had heard it last week. Here is what I can say without pretending I'm in a movie. The specimen came in on a ship that did not show up on the normal public schedule. It used a pilot. It used tugs. It came in under Coast Guard coordination. The crew stayed on board. The deck lights stayed dim. The container, and I am calling it a container because that is what it resembled from a distance, was not a standard steel box. It was a sealed unit with its own power umbilical and a refrigeration system that did not sound normal. I learned later that it was not refrigeration for comfort. It was temperature control because the protocols were written around microbes and tissue samples that degrade. I also learned later that the protocols were written by people who believed the threat was small, passive, and dumb. That morning, I took a call from a contractor who sounded irritated that he had to speak to anyone outside his bubble. He asked for confirmation on secure channel availability. I told him what was up and what was down. I logged the call. Then I went back to routine traffic because the port does not stop for one weird cargo. The port stops for fire. It stops for a chemical spill. It stops for a crane collapse. It stops when people die. By late afternoon, I heard the first real alarm. Not a drill tone, not a security beep. This was a sustained siren from the quarantine area, the kind that means evacuate now, not investigate. It went off, cut out, came back, cut out again. That is a bad sign. A clean system either stays on or stays off. A stuttering system means somebody is fighting for control, or power is failing, or both. At around 6 in the evening, normal spoken time, I got a short message over an internal line from a port security supervisor I knew well enough to recognize his breathing. His name was Grant Madsen. He sounded winded and angry. He said, "Mercer, shut down any unnecessary traffic, keep your channels clear, and if you get anything from the quarantine pier, you log it, and you do not repeat it on open lines." I asked him what happened. He said, "A containment event," and then he hung up. Containment event. That phrase is corporate language that means somebody messed up. Within an hour, I heard helicopters. Not news helicopters. Heavy rotor sound, low passes, multiple birds. Then I saw the first convoy from the window. Black sport utility vehicles, unmarked trucks, military-style cargo trucks, and a couple of armored vehicles that I'm not going to name because I cannot confirm the model. And I'm not guessing on details when people's lives are on the line. They rolled toward the quarantine area. The port police units followed. The roads started getting blocked. My building got a call from the United States Coast Guard Sector Command. The voice was a woman, clipped and calm, trained to keep emotion out of the work. She said her name was Mara Klein, Petty Officer, First Class. She asked for my direct line and my exact location. I told her. She said, "Ethan, you stay put. You do not go outside unless you are told. Keep this line available. We may route emergency maritime traffic through you if other systems go dark." I asked her what escaped. She paused just long enough to tell me she had to think about her answer. Then she said, "A non-human organism." I laughed once. Just once. Because it hit my brain wrong. Mara did not laugh. Mara said, "Do not do that. I am not joking. If you are still pretending this is a normal crisis, this is where it stops being one." The first deaths I knew about were not seen by me. I heard them in fragments. A screaming transmission cut short, a medic requesting access through a gate, then yelling that the gate would not open, a security camera feed that looped because the recorder crashed. I did not watch it. Somebody tried to show it to me on a phone later and I refused. I can handle a lot. I did not need that in my head while I was still working. What I did see later that night was the fallout of the first attempt to lock it down. A line of workers ran past my building. Hard hats bouncing. High visibility vests flapping. Some dropped their radios as they ran. A forklift sat abandoned with its forks raised and the engine still idling. That diesel rattle echoing between the warehouses until somebody's remote cut it off. Port police started shouting at people to move inland, away from the water, away from the stacks. Nobody listened cleanly. People do not listen cleanly when they do not know what the threat is. At about 10 at night, normal spoken time, I heard something that did not fit. I heard metal being hit from below, slow and deliberate, somewhere under the roadway near the storm drain access. It was not random banging. It was spaced out, then it stopped, then it started again farther away. I called it in. Port police told me to stay inside. I locked the door that already had 3 locks. I shoved the chair under the handle anyway. I'm going to tell you what the creature does in the plainest terms I can manage without turning this into panic fuel. It moves fast when it wants to. It stays still when it wants to. It climbs. It fits into places it should not fit into. It does not behave like a bear or a mountain lion. It behaves like something that watches, tests, and chooses. That is the part that made grown men start praying out loud. Around midnight, my building lost main power. The lights snapped off. The air conditioning died. The monitors went black. Then the generator kicked in with that heavy cough and the emergency lights came up. The radio rack rebooted. The port network stayed down. I was on isolated gear, old reliable stuff that does not need the fancy system. I heard someone outside the building run past, then I heard nothing for a long time. Mara called me again. Her voice was different, still controlled, but the control had effort behind it now. She said, "Ethan, listen close. The quarantine pier is compromised. The response team is taking losses. The organism has acid blood. It burned through deck plating on a support boat. Do you understand what I said?" I said yes. Then I asked her if she was sure. Mara said, "I watched it." Acid blood. That means if you shoot it, you might win the fight and still die when the spray hits you. That means even trained people hesitate. Hesitation gets you killed. Mara told me to start logging every ship that asked to leave and every ship that lost its automatic identification system. The reason was simple. In the first hours, people tried to run. Some ships tried to push off without tugs. Some tried to slip out at speed. Some drifted because their crews were distracted and terrified. A port is dangerous on a normal day. With panic crews, it becomes a demolition derby made of steel and fuel. Then Mara said something that chilled me more than any scream. She said, "Ethan, the organism is not alone anymore." I did not understand at first. I asked her what she meant. Mara did not want to say it. I could tell. Then she did. She said, "We have reports of smaller forms. Parasitic stage. People found with something attached to the face. We have at least one confirmed implantation event." I sat back in my chair and I stared at the dead monitor for the port network. My hands went numb for a minute. I am not ashamed to tell you that. I thought very clearly about my own face. I thought about every vent in this building. I thought about every time I had leaned close to a hatch or a cabinet without thinking. That was night one. That was when I realized this was not a single escaped animal. It was a life cycle. It was multiplication. By the morning, the port was a sealed zone. Officially, it was restricted access due to hazardous incident. Unofficially, it was a battle space. I watched from a narrow window as troops moved with rifles and shields. I heard orders on a secure channel that I should not have been able to monitor. But the system was messy and people were desperate. I heard someone say, 0600 hours push, and I heard someone else reply, negative, corridor compromised. That is military time, and I'm repeating it because it matters. It means this was organized and it still failed. If you are outside the port zone, you probably heard rumors about evacuation corridors. You probably heard that the freeways were open and people were being moved inland. Here is what happened on the ground. The moment the public realized something was wrong, the roads turned into parking lots. Interstate 110 backed up. The Vincent Thomas Bridge jammed. Surface streets around Wilmington and Harbor City became gridlock with cars pointing every direction. People abandoned vehicles when gas ran low or when they heard gunfire. Abandoned vehicles made the gridlock permanent. Emergency vehicles got stuck. Buses got stuck. Then the first corridor failed because the creatures did not respect barricades. They used the spaces under things. They used the storm drains. They used the gaps. They got into cars. They got into buses. They got into a staging area where people were lined up with water bottles and duffel bags. I did not watch that either. I heard it. I heard the radio traffic. I heard screaming, then static, then a man trying to keep his voice level while he asked for permission to fire into a crowd because something was moving through it. This is where my broadcast changed from port incident to city incident. Because once the first corridor failed, the creatures were not just inside the port anymore. They were inside the edges of Los Angeles. And once they were inside the edges, they had millions of hiding places. Mara stayed on the line with me as long as she could. She used my building as a relay because her usual comm center got hit. That is her word, hit. She did not say overrun. She did not say wiped out. She said hit, and I respected her for keeping it professional even when her world was falling apart. Mara told me, Ethan, I need you to understand the pattern. The organism targets isolated people. It avoids bright open areas when there is resistance. It uses ducts and overhead spaces. If you hear tapping above you, you do not investigate. If you hear a vent cover scrape, you back away from that wall. You do not stand under ceiling tiles. You do not sleep under vents. I asked her if fire worked. Mara said, fire works when you can use it without burning yourself alive. The acid reaction can aerosolize. We had one team use a flamethrower unit in a corridor and the acid flash cooked the air. 2 casualties. That line stuck in my head. Cooked the air, not a metaphor. A literal description. A confined space filled with heat and chemical spray. People choking and dying because the air itself turned into a hazard. That was the moment I started taking the building apart mentally, piece by piece, to figure out how long it could keep me alive. The walls are concrete. The door is steel. The vents run through a plenum. The roof access hatch has a padlock. The windows are narrow. The storm drain access is outside, about 30 yards away. 30 yards is nothing to something that can cross a yard in a blink. Around late morning, a new voice came onto my line. Male, rough, tired. He said his name was Luis Ortega. He was a tugboat captain out of Long Beach, and he was not calling from land. He was calling from offshore, somewhere outside the breakwater, because his tug was ordered to pull a cargo ship away from the quarantine pier during the first chaos, and then the ship never got cleared to dock anywhere else. So now he was stuck at anchor with a ship that might be contaminated and a crew that did not trust each other anymore. Luis did not talk cleanly. He talked the way dock guys talk when they are trying to keep fear from leaking into their voice. He said, Ethan, I do not know who else is listening, but I am going to say it straight. We pulled a ship off that pier because the shore team started screaming. We got the line on, we backed her out slow, and I saw one of those things on the quay under a floodlight. It was tall, black, no eyes that I could see, long head, long tail. It moved in a way that made my brain reject it. It did not move clumsy. It moved clean. I watched it climb a stack of pallets fast, then it dropped out of sight. I told my deckhand to cut the line, and I hit full reverse. I do not care what any port rule says. I was not leaving my tug pressed up against that ship longer than I had to. Luis paused, and I heard a sound in the background, a metal thump, then a low engine whine. He kept going. We anchored outside. Coast Guard told us to hold position. The ship crew said they were fine. They said their quarantine unit never opened on deck. That was a lie. I know it because later, around 2 a.m. military time, I saw a hatch on the ship open that should not have opened. I saw a man come out on deck with a flashlight. He moved slow, scanning. Then he froze. His light pointed down. He screamed once. Then the light went out. Then I heard something wet hit the deck. Not a splash in water. A hit on steel. Luis said he wanted to go in and help. His first instinct was to push his tug alongside and put a ladder up. Then he remembered what he saw on the quay, and he remembered the radio traffic about acid. He stayed off. He called the ship. No answer. He called Coast Guard. The Coast Guard told him to hold position. He said he argued. They told him if he left that they would treat him as a hostile runner and stop him by force. He believed them. Luis said, "So I'm sitting here, Ethan. I'm sitting here with a full fuel tank and a boat that can run. And I cannot go anywhere because if I run, I get shot. If I stay, whatever is on that ship might decide it wants my tug. It is daylight now, and I can see the deck, and I can see something moved cargo netting. I can see the netting shift even when there is no wind. That means something is under it, crawling or climbing or testing." I asked Luis if he had weapons. He said he had the normal stuff. Flare gun, fire axes, a couple personal pistols that the crew kept tucked. Nothing meant for this. He said one deckhand had a shotgun on board because the deckhand was paranoid even before the world broke. Luis said he told the guy to keep it close and not to fire unless he had no other choice because a shotgun blast at close range could splash acid all over the deck. Luis said, "I would rather be alive and ashamed than dead and brave." That was the first honest survival logic I heard all day. By afternoon, the city started losing big chunks of power. Not all at once, it was patchy. Neighborhoods went dark. Then they came back. Then they went dark again. That happens during heat waves and fires too, so people tried to pretend it was normal. It was not normal. It was sabotage and damage. I say that because I heard utility crews on the emergency channels saying substations were compromised, crews were pulled back, and one dispatcher said a crew found organic residue on a transformer yard fence. That could mean anything. But in context, it meant something climbed where it should not climb and did something that made people decide to stop sending workers. At that point, my building became more valuable than it ever was during a normal week. I had a generator. I had a mast. I had old radio gear with separate power conditioning. I had a clear line to a hill relay that was built for disasters. I kept talking because I could and because the silence outside was getting heavier. That afternoon, Mara came back on the line for a short burst. Her breathing was hard. She sounded like she had been running with gear. She said, "Ethan, I am moving to a new position. Our sector command is relocating. We are losing the port. Repeat, we are losing the port." I asked her what losing the port meant. She answered in a way I will not forget. She said, "It means we can no longer guarantee any gate is secure, any pier is clear, any ship is uncontaminated. It means we stop trying to hold ground and start trying to stop spread. We burn what we have to burn. We cut what we have to cut." Then she told me to listen for a name. Dr. Sahana Rao. Biosecurity contractor attached to the quarantine operation. Mara said Dr. Rao might call me because Dr. Rao had technical details that could save people if the details got out. And the official channels were too slow, too cautious, too worried about liability. When Mara signed off, I sat there in the hum of the generator and the static hiss of the open channel, and I realized something ugly. The government was not lying because it was evil. It was lying because it did not know how to tell the truth without detonating the public. The truth was already detonating it anyway. I did not sleep that night. I tried once, sitting upright with my back against a file cabinet, but every time my eyes drifted shut, I heard tapping. Sometimes it came from the ceiling. Sometimes it came from the wall behind the radio rack. Sometimes it came from outside. It might have been debris shifting in the wind. It might have been my brain. I did not gamble on it. I stayed awake, checked the vents, checked the door, checked the hallway camera feed that still worked on local power. At around 3 in the morning, normal spoken time, I got a call on a line I did not expect to work. The caller ID was blank. The voice was a woman, and the first thing she said was, "Ethan Mercer, do not hang up." I said, "Who is this?" She said, "Dr. Sahana Rao. Mara told me you would pick up." Dr. Rao did not waste time comforting me. Dr. Rao spoke with the tone of somebody who had been ignored too many times and had decided that politeness was dead weight. She said, "I am going to give you practical information. I am not asking permission. I am telling you because people are dying and the official message is still pretending this is contained." Dr. Rao explained the quarantine protocols in plain language that still carried the shape of her training. She said the facility was designed around biosafety level 4 concepts: negative pressure rooms, high-efficiency particulate air filtration, chemical showers, controlled entry and exit, and strict chain of custody. She said that works for viruses, bacteria, spores, and tissue samples. It works for something that cannot open doors and cannot plan. It does not work for a living predator that can learn layout, exploit ventilation, and use human panic against humans. Dr. Rao said, "The specimen was not supposed to be alive in the way it is alive. The briefing material described it as dormant. It was not dormant. It was waiting. It used the first chance it got. A technician cut a corner on a seal check because he was on a schedule and because management pushed speed. The specimen breached containment inside the primary chamber. It did not go into open air first. It went into the service spaces. It got into the ducts. It got into the crawl spaces. That is why your cameras did not catch it at first." I asked her how she knew all that. Dr. Rao said, "Because I watched the sensor logs and I watched people die while the managers argued about paperwork." Then she told me the part that made me grip the desk hard enough to hurt my hand. She said the specimen was only the start because the specimen had a reproductive phase that required a host. She said the small parasitic forms were not an accident. They were the system doing what it does. She said the people found with attachments were not random. They were the result of a new stage that had been released. Dr. Rao said, "If you find an egg, you do not approach it. If you find a cluster of organic material that looks wet and ribbed, you do not approach it. If you see what looks like a large hand-shaped organism moving on the floor, you do not try to stomp it. You back away. You close doors. You create distance. If it gets on your face, you are not going to pull it off without help, and help may not arrive." Her voice cracked once when she said that last line, then she swallowed and kept going. Dr. Rao told me the organism used smell and vibration. She said it reacted to sharp noise. She said it did not react in a simple way, not just charging toward sound. Sometimes it used sound to locate. Sometimes it used sound to bait. She said one team tried to lure it with banging in a corridor, and the creature came from behind them through a ceiling access point because it learned the pattern of the building faster than the team could adjust. That is the line from your prompt, something that learns faster than humans. I am telling you, that line is real in my head now. I watched humans spend an hour arguing over a door control. The creature spent that hour finding a new path. I asked Dr. Rao what the military plan was. She laughed once, sharp and bitter. She said the plan was written for a contaminated container, not for a spreading organism. The plan assumed you could isolate the cargo, isolate the personnel, and sterilize the area. It assumed the threat could not climb a crane, swim a channel, or ride inside a vehicle. It assumed the threat would not actively hunt. Then she told me something that explained the early confusion. She said the first response teams were told to treat it as a biohazard first, not a combatant. That meant they wore gear that made them slow. That meant they followed decontamination procedures that created choke points. That meant they spent precious minutes doing protocol while the creature moved. She said, protocol killed people. I asked her what she wanted me to do. Dr. Rao said, you keep broadcasting. You tell people to stop running in crowds. You tell people to stop sheltering in places with vents. You tell people not to hide in basements connected to storm drains. You tell people that if they are near the water, they need to think about boats because bridges and freeways are traps now. You tell people to treat any sealed building with missing persons as contaminated. You tell people to stop trying to be heroes. I told her I would. She said, good. Because I'm going to die soon, and I want my work to matter. I asked her where she was. She refused to give me an exact location. She said only that she was in a service tunnel that connected facilities near the port, and she was moving slowly because she could hear movement above the ceiling panels. She said she was carrying a laptop with logs and video that proved management negligence. She said the logs would not matter if nobody lived to read them. Before she hung up, Dr. Rao said one more thing. She said, "Do not trust clean surfaces." I asked her what she meant. She said the organism secreted resin and left trails that hardened into a slick surface. She said those surfaces could be used as climb routes. She said if you see glossy black residue on a wall or ceiling, you assume it is a path and you move away from it. Then the call dropped. I sat there listening to the generator and the distant pops of gunfire that were too spaced out to be a single fight. After Dr. Rao's call, I started talking differently. I stopped trying to sound calm. I started sounding honest. I said out loud, to whoever is out there, that crowds will get you killed because you cannot move and you cannot see. I said storm drains are highways for things that crawl. I said stay away from ventilation shafts and ceiling voids. I said if you shelter in a place with solid walls and minimal openings. And do not assume you are safe because a door is locked. Locked doors are not magic. I also told people something that feels wrong to say, but it is real. If you are in a group and somebody gets an attachment on the face, you do not bring that person into your shelter. You do not keep that person close because you feel guilty. You do not tell yourself you will figure it out later. Later is when it kills you. I hate saying that. I said it anyway. Luis called again at dawn. His voice sounded hollow. He said the ship crew tried to launch a lifeboat in the night. He watched the lifeboat hit the water. He watched it drift. He watched 3 men in it waving lights. Then he watched something drop from the ship's side into the boat. He said the lights thrashed. He said the boat flipped. He said, I heard screaming that cut off too fast for water. Luis said his tug crew was close to mutiny because one of his deckhands wanted to run the tug and chance getting shot rather than wait for the ship to decide to come over. Luis said he had to put his pistol on the table and say, if you try it, you are not leaving with my boat. He said it felt insane to threaten his own crew while monsters were out there, but fear makes people into problems. Luis told me he saw Coast Guard cutters farther out, holding a line. He saw a helicopter dump something into the water near the ship, maybe flares, maybe depth charges, maybe something else. He did not know. He said he saw the ship's deck flare bright for a moment, then go dark again. He said the smell reached him over the water, a chemical stink that made his eyes burn. He said, they are trying to sterilize it from a distance, Ethan. That is what it looks like. Sterilize, another word that belongs to labs, not to living streets. By midday, word spread that downtown Los Angeles had incidents. Not just the harbor, not just Wilmington. People reported attacks in parking structures and service stairwells, in the underground areas of Union Station, in the tunnel spaces that most commuters never think about. I cannot confirm all those reports. I can confirm that the city started closing subway access, then lost the ability to control crowds at stations, then shut the whole system down. A rail system is a perfect travel network for something that uses tunnels. The authorities realized that too late. I stayed in my building because leaving meant crossing open ground where I would be visible, then navigating roads clogged with dead cars, then guessing which route was clear. Guessing gets you killed. Staying also might get me killed. I picked the option where I had walls and radios. Here is a detail that matters for anyone still planning movement. Ports have refrigerated warehouses. Those warehouses have thick insulation and heavy doors. People tried to shelter inside them because they thought cold and sealed meant safe. Dr. Rao's warning about eggs and clusters matters here because cold storage also hides things and it muffles sound, and the air handling is complicated. If a creature gets into the ducting of a cold warehouse, it can move unseen above you while you sit in the dark, telling yourself you are safe. I heard one report of a cold warehouse shelter that went silent. I did not hear from it again. Mara returned on the line late in the afternoon, and I could tell she had been through something brutal because her voice had a shake she was fighting. She said, Ethan, the federal response is shifting. The port zone is now considered lost. The priority is preventing spread inland. I asked her if they were going to bomb the port. Mara did not answer directly. She said, do you have anyone else in your building? I said no. She said, then you need to decide how you want to survive the next 12 hours, because there is going to be a push, and it is going to be loud. I asked her what kind of push. Mara said, fire and explosives, controlled demolitions, fuel air burns, anything that can collapse the spaces it uses. I asked her if that would kill it. Mara said, "I do not know. I know it will kill people. I know it will destroy infrastructure. I know doing nothing will kill more people. That is where we are." Then Mara said something I will respect her for until I die. She said, "Ethan, you are a civilian. You do not owe anybody heroics. If you can leave safely, you leave. If you cannot, you shelter and you keep talking. Your voice is helping more than you know." When she signed off, I started preparing for a long night. I moved supplies into the interior room with the least vents. I taped plastic over a couple of grates, not because plastic stops claws, but because it gives me a visual cue if something pushes through. I took a fire axe from the safety cabinet. I am not pretending a fire axe makes me safe. It makes me less helpless. I put on a hard hat and goggles because acid is a thing now and I like having eyes. I also did something that felt ridiculous, but made sense in my head. I poured dish soap and water on the floor near the door and near the vents. If something stepped in, it might leave tracks. That is basic tracking, not a trick. I needed every edge I could get. At around 9 at night, normal spoken time, the push started. I heard explosions from the direction of Terminal Island, deep booms that rolled through the air. Then I saw an orange glow rise above the container stacks. Not a pretty fire, an industrial fire, thick smoke, the kind of fire that eats oxygen. The radio channels filled with fragments, units calling for clearance, people screaming for medevac, a man shouting that a blast opened a warehouse wall and it came out with more of them. That line mattered. More of them. That means there were multiple mature creatures now. That means whatever nesting happened, it happened fast. I'm going to pause here and tell you something plain. If this organism is established in a port, it has access to ships. Ships go everywhere. Even with the Navy and Coast Guard trying to hold a line, you cannot perfectly search every hull, every cargo hold, every ventilation trunk, every empty container stack. One contaminated vessel leaving at night is enough to seed a new city. That is why you are hearing reports from other ports already. That is why the story is spreading faster than any official briefing. During the second hour of the burn, I heard scraping on my roof. Not wind, not settling. A dragging scrape across the access hatch area, then a pause, then a second scrape closer to the vent stack. My throat went dry. I killed my interior lights. I shut off anything that made hum. I kept the transmitter running because silence helps the creature, not me. I crouched behind the desk with the fire axe and listened. The scraping stopped. Then I heard tapping on the roof, slow, spaced out, moving in a line. It was walking and testing. It was mapping. I spoke into the microphone anyway, quietly, because if I stopped, the fear would eat me from inside. I said, "If you are sheltering, do not assume roofs are safe. Do not assume you are safe because you are above ground. If you hear movement above, you do not go up. You do not investigate. You prepare to move deeper into whatever shelter you have." Luis broke in over the line, voice tight. He whispered, and that tells you how scared he was, because tugboat captains do not whisper. He said, "Ethan, I have movement on the water. Something came off the ship." Luis told me he saw a dark shape slide into the water from the cargo ship's stern. He said it did not splash much. He said it moved under the surface with a wake line that did not match debris. He said it reached his tug and he saw something grip the rubber fender at the waterline. He said, "It climbed, Ethan. It climbed up the side of my tug using the rivets and seams." Luis said he did not fire. He backed away from the rail because he did not want acid spray on his face. He told his crew to seal the wheelhouse and cut exterior lights. He said the creature paused on the deck, head turning, listening. He said it moved toward the engine room hatch. He said the only reason he knew that is because the hatch handle shifted. Then it stopped. It learned the hatch was latched. It moved away. Luis said it did not panic. It did not thrash. It tested. Then it changed plan. That is what scares me. It is thinking. Luis said he had one option he hated. He had a fire suppression system in the engine room, a fixed system meant for diesel fires. He said if the creature went below, he would dump the system and flood the space with suppressant. Not because it would kill it, but because it would buy time and maybe drive it out. He said the downside was that he might stall the tug if the system triggered shutdowns, and then he would be dead in the water with a monster on board. I asked Luis what he wanted from me. He said he wanted a witness. He said, "If I die, I want somebody to know I did not run. I did the best I could with what I had." That is the kind of thing people say when they know the odds. While Luis was talking, the tapping on my roof stopped, and I heard a new sound, a soft scrape inside the wall, near the ventilation chase. It was slow. It was controlled. It was not rats. Rats do not scrape in a straight line and stop when you stop breathing. I backed away from the wall. I moved into the interior room with the taped vents. I shut the steel door between rooms. I stayed on the mic, but I lowered my voice. I said, "If you are still in a building with vents, you need a second barrier. Close interior doors, create layers, do not sleep under vents. Keep your face covered if you can. Eye protection matters." Dr. Rao called again, and her voice was weaker. She sounded cold. She sounded exhausted. She said, "Ethan, I do not have long." The burn started. It drove them out of some nests and into others. The plan is not clean. I asked her if she was safe. She gave a short laugh. She said, "Safe is gone." Dr. Rao told me she found a nest area in a service space near the quarantine facility, formed in less than a day. She said the resin was everywhere, and it hardened into load-bearing structures that clung to walls and pipes. She said it was not random, it was engineered. She said the eggs were placed in a way that controlled approach angles, forcing a person to step into a specific zone if he got close. She said the face parasites were fast and accurate. She said it is an ambush system. I asked her if the military had any effective method. She said the only method that reduced numbers was sealing and burning, then sealing again. She said open fights favored the creatures because they used vertical space and because the acid punished aggressive fire. She said the best results came when teams used barriers, distance, and remote ignition. She said, "If you have to fight, fight from behind cover and do not rush." Then she told me the thing that made my stomach twist. She said the original specimen was not the main danger anymore. The main danger was dispersal. She said eggs could be moved. She said a face parasite could ride in a vehicle wheel well, in a crate, in a backpack. She said if people fled with contaminated gear, they would carry the outbreak farther than any ship. Dr. Rao's voice got quiet. She said, "People will run, Ethan. People will steal cars and load kids and run. They will not check for contamination. They will not want to believe it. That is how this becomes national." I asked her what she wanted me to say. She said, "Tell people to stop grabbing abandoned bags. Tell people not to take random blankets from shelters. Tell people to check vehicles before they get inside, especially the footwell and underseats. Tell people to keep faces covered if they are moving through unknown spaces." Then Dr. Rao said, "If you see resin, you turn around. You do not walk under it. You do not touch it. You do not cut it without full skin coverage. Acid residue can remain active." I asked her if she could make it out. She took a breath that rattled. She said, "No, I am calling you because I can still call you. I want my last hours to matter." Then I heard a sound on her end, a sharp clack, then a heavy thud. Dr. Rao stopped speaking. The line stayed open. I heard her breathing get fast. I heard a wet hiss, not steam, not radio static. A wet hiss in the real world. Then I heard her say very calmly, "It is above me." She did not scream. That is what broke me. She did not scream. I heard her shift, trying to move without noise. I heard her whisper, "Do not stop broadcasting." Then the line went dead. I sat with that silence and I kept talking anyway, because if I stopped, her last request meant nothing. Outside, the industrial fire kept roaring. The smoke got thicker. Ash drifted past my window. The air inside my building started smelling faintly of chemicals. That meant the burn was close enough to leak into the wind. I sealed a towel under the door. It was not heroic. It was a small action to keep my lungs working. The scraping in my wall stopped for a while. Then it started again at the ceiling vent in the interior room. The plastic tape bulged slightly, then relaxed. Bulged, then relaxed. Something was pressing from the other side, testing the resistance. I backed away until my shoulders hit the far wall. I held the axe up and I realized how stupid an axe is against something that bleeds acid. If I swing and hit it, I might get sprayed. If I miss, I die. If I do nothing, I die. Those are not good choices. I spoke into the mic and I told the truth again. I said, "It is in the building with me." I said it quietly. I did not shout. Shouting gives it a target. I said, if you are listening and you are nearby, do not come here. Do not try to rescue me. Rescue gets you killed. Survive where you are. Luis cut in again and his voice was strained. He said, Ethan, I dumped the engine room suppressant. Luis told me the creature got below decks. He knew because he heard a metallic crawl in the engine room space, and he saw condensation on the hatch window shift, in patterns that were not vibration. He triggered the fixed system. The tug's alarms blared. The engine shut down, the space filled with suppressant. Luis said he and his crew sealed the wheelhouse and waited. Luis said, it came back up, Ethan. It did not die. It came back up fast, and it was angry. He said the creature slammed into the wheelhouse door once, hard enough to bow the metal. He said acid dripped from its body onto the deck and ate into the paint, then into the steel. He said the smell got sharp. He said the crew started crying. One man started praying in Spanish. Luis said he wanted to pray too, but he needed his hands steady. Luis said the creature stopped attacking the door and moved away. It did not keep bashing until it got in. It changed tactics. It went quiet. Luis said that silence was worse than the noise. He said, it is waiting for us to open the door. It is listening for us to move. I told Luis to stay sealed. He said he would. He said he had a flare gun, and he was considering firing a flare through a cracked window if the creature tried to breach. Not because it would kill it, but because light and heat might make it back off for a second. He said he hated gambling with fire on a boat. He said the alternative was worse. While Luis was talking, my vent tape bulged again, harder this time. The tape stretched. I saw a dark shape behind it, not detailed, just mass. Then I saw the tape tear with a slow rip, and a thin black limb slid through, feeling the air. I did not swing the axe. I did not rush. I stepped back, and I grabbed a fire extinguisher, the dry chemical type, and I aimed it at the opening. I waited until the limb pushed farther in. Then I discharged the extinguisher in a solid burst, filling the vent opening and the nearby air with powder. The limb snapped back out. Not because it was hurt, I do not know if it was hurt, but because it did not like obstruction. The tape flap fluttered. Something moved behind the vent grill, then it stopped. I stayed still. I did not breathe loud. I kept the microphone close and I whispered. I said, if you have a dry chemical extinguisher, it can buy you a second. Not a win, a second. Use it to create space, then move. The ceiling above me creaked, not a building settling. A focused pressure, something moving in the plenum space. I realized it had other paths. My vent was only one probe. It was mapping. At that point, the burn outside surged. A new explosion hit closer. The building shook. Dust fell from a ceiling seam. The emergency lights flickered. The generator changed pitch. My heart did what hearts do when you think you are about to die, but I am not going to dress it up. I tightened my grip on the extinguisher, and I kept talking because silence felt worse. I said, if you are in the harbor area, the burn is moving. If you see smoke thickening, you need to decide if staying kills you faster than leaving. Do not run into open streets. Move through solid structures. Avoid wide stairwells with open overhead space. Avoid parking structures. Avoid service corridors. Choose rooms with fewer openings. Then something hit my door. Not a gentle hit. A heavy impact that made the steel ring. My inner door, not the building exterior. That means it was inside the outer area already. Inside the hallway. Inside the building envelope. It hit again and the handle jerked. It knew the handle. It understood levers. I am telling you that plainly. It understood the handle. I backed into the corner. I aimed the extinguisher at the door seam. I kept the axe within reach. I did not have a gun. I am glad I did not, because shooting would have sprayed acid in a closed room, and that might have ended me even if I hit it. The impact stopped. Then I heard a scrape above the door frame. A claw on concrete. It was moving to the ceiling space again. It was using the doorway as a reference point. It was thinking in 3 dimensions. I moved to the next interior room, the one with the backup batteries and the radio rack. I shut the door behind me. I wedged a metal chair under the handle. I did not believe the chair would stop it. I believed the chair would make noise when it failed, and noise is information. I am still here right now while I am saying these words. I do not know if I will be here in 10 minutes. I am going to keep going until I cannot. Mara cut in one last time, and this one sounded recorded, not live. It might have been a looped message routed through whatever system is still alive. Her voice was steady, but there was grief in it. She said, "All civilian vessels in the inner harbor are ordered to remain in place unless directed. All road corridors are suspended. Shelter in place is advised for all areas north of the port until further notice. If you have the ability to shelter away from vents and service spaces, do so. Do not approach unknown organic material. Do not attempt rescue operations alone." I want to challenge something that is going to pop up in your head if you are still trying to reason this out. The idea that this cannot be real because humans would have planned for it. Humans plan for what humans already understand. The quarantine protocols were built for germs and paperwork and liability. They were built for sample tubes and freezer units and controlled access. They were not built for a predator that can climb a crane and learn a door handle and use a vent path. That mismatch is the whole disaster. It is not that nobody tried. It is that the system was built for the wrong threat. Another thing worth challenging is the instinct to assume the military will solve it cleanly with force. Force is not magic. Force has limits when the target is fast, hidden, multiplying, and punishes contact with acid. A bullet that stops a human does not fix a creature that leaves a chemical hazard behind. A bomb that collapses a warehouse also collapses escape routes and burns civilians alive. There is no clean solution here, and anyone selling you a clean solution is selling comfort, not truth. Right now, I can hear movement above the ceiling tiles in this room. Slow, careful. I can hear a light scrape, then a pause, then another scrape. It is searching for a way down that does not put it in front of me. It does not want a fair fight. It wants a sure kill. Luis is still on the line too, breathing hard, whispering prayers under his breath, between words. He told me the creature is still outside his wheelhouse. He told me he can hear it on the deck. He told me one of his crew passed out. He told me he is rationing air conditioning because the generator is off and the battery inverter is struggling. That is a tugboat problem, not a monster problem. But the tugboat problem becomes the monster problem when the wheelhouse gets hot and people start making mistakes. If you are listening and you are on a boat offshore, here is what I can tell you in plain terms. Stay sealed. Do not open doors to check. Use mirrors, cameras, anything that lets you see without exposing yourself. If you have life jackets, wear them. Not because you will swim away from this, but because if you end up in the water, you want every advantage. The ocean is not safe either, but drowning is a boring way to die compared to the alternative. If you are inland, do not drive toward the port to look. Do not do it. You will get trapped. You will add to the chaos. You will carry contamination back with you if you survive. Curiosity is luxury. This is not the time. The ceiling tile above my radio rack just shifted. Not much, a millimeter or two. Enough to show a hairline gap, enough to let dust drift down. The gap widened, slow. Something is pushing from above, not crashing through, pushing. It wants to open a line of sight. I am going to do what Dr. Rao told me in different words. I am going to keep distance. I am going to move out of this room, deeper into the building, toward the concrete stairwell that has the smallest openings. I am taking the microphone with me. The cable might snag. If it does, you may lose me. If you lose me, that means either the equipment failed or I did. The cable snags fast. It catches on the corner of the desk, then on the metal lip of a rack mount drawer, then on a hinge that never mattered until now. I feel the pull at my shoulder and I stop because I am not doing that thing where you yank harder and make noise. Noise is how you announce yourself. I kneel, slow, and I untangle the cable with 2 fingers, eyes up, listening for anything in the ceiling. I hear a soft scrape above me, not over the whole building, just right over this room. That means it tracked me here. It heard me move. It heard the cable drag. It knows the shape of my panic even when I try to hide it. I make a decision right there that feels small but matters. I unplug the microphone. I leave it. I do not drag that cable anymore. I reach into the cabinet where we keep the emergency go kit, the thing we use when a forklift takes out a junction box or when a storm knocks antennas offline. It is a hard case with a portable radio, spare batteries, a hand microphone, and a short coax jumper that can feed into the wall panel tied to the roof antenna. I hook it up with hands that do not feel steady, and I keep talking into the hand microphone because I would rather sound rough than go silent. If you ever wondered what the difference is between a normal emergency and this one, it is that in a normal emergency you are still thinking about policy. In this one you are thinking about cable length and how fast something can cross a room. I step into the hallway with the portable radio pressed against my chest, the hand microphone near my mouth, goggles on, cloth over my nose, extinguisher in one hand, axe in the other. The emergency lights throw weak pools of light. The air is warmer in the hallway. The building hums from the generator, and that hum feels loud now, too steady, too easy to track. I stop by the breaker panel that controls the non-essential loads. I know this panel. I have touched it 100 times. I start shutting things off one by one without killing the transmitter. The hallway lights dim further. The air handler stays dead. The building gets quieter. The generator drops pitch a little as the load reduces. It still runs. It still makes sound. It makes less sound. That is the best I can do. I am telling you this because the small choices matter. A running generator is a beacon. A loud fan is a beacon. A loose door is a beacon. You cannot remove every sound, but you can strip the dumb ones. Something bumps the far end of the hallway. Not a crash. A controlled contact. Then quiet again. It is moving in the dark outside the light pools. It is staying just out of sight because it does not need to rush. It has time. I do not. I slide into the stairwell and close the heavy door behind me. The latch catches with a clunk that I hate. I freeze, listening for an immediate response. Nothing? Not yet. In the stairwell, I can finally breathe a little more air without that constant sense of ceiling tiles above my head. The walls are poured concrete. The corners are sharp. The steps are rough. There is no drop ceiling. There are no vents. There are only 2 doors on each landing, each one heavy steel, each one meant to slow smoke. It is not meant to slow this thing, but it is better than drywall and taped plastic. I do not go up. I do not go down to the basement either. Dr. Rao's warning about service spaces and drains is loud in my head. Basements connect to everything. Basements are where you go to die quietly if something can travel through pipes. I stay on the middle landing, halfway between roof and ground, where the stairwell is hardest to access without making noise. I sit on the step with my back against the wall, portable radio on my lap, and I start talking again. Steady, because the moment I stop, my brain starts doing the ugly math. How long until the fuel runs out? How long until the burn outside eats all the oxygen? How long until it finds a way into this stairwell? Anybody listening, I say. If you are in a building, pick a spot with concrete and fewer openings. If you have to choose between a glass office and a stairwell, choose the stairwell. Do not hide in a drop ceiling space. Do not hide in a crawl space. Do not hide in a storm drain access. I know it sounds obvious, but people are doing it because people are scared and people want to disappear. The portable radio crackles. The channel is messy now. Too many people trying to talk on too few working repeaters. I get a voice cutting through. Male, angry, thick with smoke. He says, "Port Police Unit. If anyone is alive near Anchorage Road, respond." Then it cuts off. Then I hear someone else sobbing. Then static. Then Luis comes back, low and tight. "Ethan, I got a problem. The Coast Guard line broke." I ask him what he means. Luis tells me the cutter that was holding position changed course hard and ran lights out for a minute. A helicopter dipped low and then climbed fast. He says that is not normal behavior unless something is moving toward them. He says he heard a mayday call from a smaller boat, maybe a pilot boat, maybe a private fishing boat, but the words were broken. He caught "on board" and "in the cabin" and "acid." Luis says he looked out at the water and saw a dark shape move between his tug and the anchored ship, not splashing, just a smooth push under the surface. He says, "If it can swim, Ethan, then the water is not a wall. The water is a road." That one lands heavy because a lot of people's escape plan is boats. In every coastal crisis, boats become the fantasy. You picture open water and distance and a horizon. You forget that boats are also tight spaces with hatches and vents and engine rooms, and if something gets on board, you have nowhere to run. Luis tells me he is going to cut anchor and drift farther out. Slow, quiet. No running lights if he can help it. He says he would rather risk a collision in the dark than sit near that ship another hour. He says his crew is begging him to do something, anything, and the longer he sits, the more likely someone opens a door out of panic. I tell Luis to do what keeps the wheelhouse sealed. I tell him to put people in life jackets. I tell him to keep a fire extinguisher at the door seam. He tells me he already did. He tells me one of his men tried to open a side window to breathe because the wheelhouse is getting hot, and Luis had to physically stop him. He says, "I am not proud of it, Ethan. I grabbed him hard. I told him if he opens that window, he kills us all." That is a realistic decision. It is ugly and it is real. People do not die because they are dumb. People die because they want air, they want comfort. They want to believe the thing outside is gone. While Luis is talking, I hear a new sound in my stairwell. A faint metal tick, then another. It is not coming from above. It is coming from the door on the landing below me, the one that opens into the main floor. Something is touching the handle on the other side. Slow, controlled. It is learning again. I stop speaking for half a second, then I keep going in a whisper because I do not want it to associate my silence with safety. I want it to waste time. I want it to test wrong doors. I want it to make mistakes. The handle jiggles once, then it stops. Then I hear claws, or something hard scrape along the door seam, top to bottom, as if it is feeling for a gap. That door is tight. It is built to stop smoke. Smoke is thinner than anything alive, and it still stops smoke. That gives me hope for maybe a minute. Outside, the catastrophe keeps expanding. You can hear it in the background even if you are not near me. The port fire is not just one fire now. It is multiple. The way I know is the sound. One industrial fire has a steady roar. Multiple fires have overlapping roars and separate pops. The pops are shipping containers venting, pressurized cylinders failing, tires cooking off, and fuel tanks doing what fuel tanks do when heat gets under them. I get another voice on the radio, and this one is clear enough that I turn the volume down so I can focus. It is a woman. She says her name is Renee Caldwell. She says she is the night security manager for a high-rise in downtown Los Angeles near Bunker Hill. She is calling from a security office on a backup generator. She says she found this channel because her building radio technician left a cheat sheet taped under the desk for disaster use, and right now rules do not matter. Renee talks in long bursts, and I do not interrupt because this is what people need. A human voice describing what is happening in a real place. She says her building took in about 60 people after the first corridor failed. Office workers, a couple families who walked in from the street, a delivery driver who had blood on his shirt and swore it was not his. She says she locked the lobby doors, shut down the elevators, and tried to keep everyone in the lower floors because the upper floors have too many empty offices and too many ceiling spaces. She says she learned that lesson fast. Renee says, "We heard something in the elevator shaft around 1 a.m, normal time. It was not the elevator. The elevator was shut down. It was movement in the shaft climbing. We thought maybe it was a person trapped between floors. We were trying to be decent. One of the guys, a finance guy named Trevor, said he used to do rock climbing and he could go up the maintenance ladder inside the shaft and check. I told him no. He tried anyway because he thought he was being useful. He opened the shaft door on the first floor service corridor and shined a flashlight up. Something dropped down fast and hit him. It did not fall. It chose the drop. It grabbed him and dragged him into the shaft before any of us could even move." Renee pauses and I can hear her breathing. She forces herself to keep talking. She says they heard Trevor screaming. Then the screaming stopped. Then they heard a wet sound travel upward as if something climbed with him. She says after that, nobody wanted to be decent. Everybody wanted to be sealed. She says she barred the shaft door with a fire hose cart and told people to stay away from it. Renee says she has another problem. People in her building are arguing about whether they should leave. Some want to run because they heard the military is going to burn downtown next, not just the harbor. Some want to stay because the streets outside are full of abandoned cars and people screaming. She says she does not have weapons. She has pepper spray, a baton, and a couple fire axes. She says she does not even know if the fire alarm sprinklers will help or hurt, because if acid hits water, she does not know what happens, and she is not finding out on purpose. I tell Renee what Dr. Rao told me, the practical parts. I tell her elevator shafts and stairwells are danger routes if the creature is already in the building. I tell her to keep faces covered. I tell her not to let anyone investigate ducts or shafts. I tell her if she sees glossy resin or organic buildup, she treats that area as contaminated. I tell her if the building has a roof access hatch, she keeps it locked because roof does not mean safe. Roof means more angles. Renee asks me, and you can hear the anger in her voice. Why is it in downtown at all? How did it get here? I answer her with the most honest guess I can defend. I tell her people fled the port area in cars and buses, and if even one parasitic stage got into a vehicle, it rides. I tell her service tunnels connect the harbor infrastructure to rail lines and utility corridors that run inland. I tell her the city has miles of underground spaces that are perfect for something that climbs and hides. I tell her the official line about containment was always a hope, not a guarantee. Renee goes quiet for a moment, then she says, I hear something above the ceiling tiles in the lobby. She says it flat, not dramatic, just a statement. She says she is going to move everyone into the concrete stairwell core of the building because it has the fewest openings. She says she is going to use office furniture to block access points, not because furniture stops it, but because furniture creates noise and slows. She says she will keep her radio on and keep listening. That is a realistic decision too. It is not heroic. It is not cinematic. It is moving toward the dumbest, thickest part of a building and hoping the door holds. The handle on the door below me stops moving. Then I hear a different sound, faint and high, a wet hiss in the stairwell that does not belong to machinery. It is close enough that my skin tightens under the shirt. I have no better words. Something is here, and it is not just touching a door anymore. I slide up 2 steps and keep my back against the concrete, trying to make myself smaller without making noise. I aim the extinguisher at the seam of the door nearest me, because if it comes through, my best shot is to blind it for a second with powder and run. I do not think I can kill it. I think I can maybe escape it. Outside, a new catastrophe hits the air. The smell changes. It goes from smoke to something sharper, chemical, throat burning. That means a hazardous cargo is burning or a facility nearby took damage. In this zone, that could be a container stack with industrial chemicals. It could be a warehouse with pool supplies. It could be a refinery unit. It could be a tank farm. I cannot name which. I can tell you that the air is getting worse, and people who stay too long in open smoke without protection will collapse even if nothing touches them. I say into the microphone, if you smell sharp chemical burn in the air, you need to cover your nose and mouth. A wet cloth is better than nothing. Move away from low ground where heavier gases settle. Do not go into basements. Do not hide in storm drains. Smoke is one problem. Chemical smoke is a second problem. Do not collect both. Luis cuts in again and his voice is cracked now. He says the tug moved, slow, and the creature on deck moved with it, keeping balance. He says it did not slip. He says it hugged the shadows and stayed low, as if it understood the outline of the wheelhouse windows and did not want to be seen. He says he saw it through a small gap in the curtain, and he wishes he did not. Luis says the tug's deck camera, the cheap one aimed at the winch, caught a glimpse of something else, smaller, fast. It ran across the deck and disappeared under a hatch lip. Luis says, Ethan, I think it laid something. I think it is making more. That means the ship offshore is not just a trap for his crew. It is a breeding ground that can spread to the ocean, to other vessels, to any coastline that receives a contaminated boat. I feel sick thinking about it, and I push that feeling down because I need my hands steady. The door below me suddenly dents inward with a sharp impact, not repeated bashing, one hard hit. The frame squeals. Dust shakes loose, then silence. It is testing force now, not just handles. I move up another half flight, slow. I do not run. Running is noise, and noise is a trail. I reach the next landing and I see the roof access sign. My brain wants roof because roof feels open. My brain is wrong. Roof is where it was earlier. Roof is where it can drop down. Roof is where helicopters and drones and burning debris can force you out. I stay in the stairwell. I make another decision. I crack open the door on this landing just enough to look into the office floor corridor. I do it slowly so the hinge does not scream. The corridor is dark. The emergency exit signs glow faint. I see nothing moving. I also smell something in there that is not smoke, a sour organic smell that makes my stomach tighten. That smell could be anything in a port building. It could also be the resin Dr. Rao described. I do not step into it. I close the door again. I say quietly, "This is Ethan at the Harbor Comm building. I am still alive. If you are nearby, do not come. If you are inside your own shelter, stay. Do not travel unless you have a clear reason and a clear route. Movement for the sake of movement is how people get killed in this. Renee comes back on the line for a moment. Her voice is shaking now. She says people are in the stairwell with her. She says somebody is crying and she cannot get him to stop. She says she can hear something above them in the ceiling void over the lobby, moving fast, then stopping, then moving again. She says it sounds as if it is listening to their breath. She says she told everyone to shut their mouths and breathe through cloth. She says she feels cruel saying it, but she would rather be cruel than dead. I tell Renee she is doing the right thing. I do not sugarcoat it. I tell her the creature uses sound and vibration. I tell her crying is a beacon. I tell her to separate the person who cannot stay quiet, not out of hate, but because one person can kill 50. I hate myself while I say it. I say it anyway because Dr. Rao died to get the truth out, and I am not wasting that. Then the stairwell door below me blows inward, not fully, but enough that I hear the metal pop and the seal tear. I hear claws on concrete. I hear the weight enter the stairwell. It does not stomp. It moves with control. Each contact point is placed. I freeze. I stop breathing loud. I keep the microphone near my mouth and I whisper, "It is in the stairwell." I hear it climb, not rushing. Coming up one flight, then stopping, then scraping a claw along the wall as if it is reading the space, then climbing again. It is not guessing. It is searching. In that moment, I understand something about the containment failure that goes beyond protocols. A port is a maze built for machines and humans. This thing treats the maze as a hunting tool. It uses vertical space. It uses doors. It uses the fact that humans hesitate. It uses the fact that humans cannot stay quiet when terror hits. That is why the corridors failed. That is why the zones went dark. It is not just the creature. It is the environment that gives it advantages. I shift my weight 1 inch and the stair tread creaks. The sound is small. In the silence, it is loud. The climbing stops instantly. Absolute. Then I hear its head move, a faint scrape, turning toward my landing. I do the only thing I can that does not involve swinging an axe and getting sprayed. I pull the pin on the extinguisher and I brace it at the corner of the landing so I can blast the stairwell below without stepping into view. I wait until I hear it move again, one step, then another, getting close. Then I discharge the extinguisher down the stairwell in a heavy burst. Powder fills the space, thick, choking, obscuring everything. It is not a weapon. It is a curtain. I hear a sharp movement in the powder cloud, fast, then a retreating scrape. It backed off. Not because it is scared, because it lost clean information. Predators hate losing information. I turn and I run now, but not down the stairs, not past it. I push through the door into the office floor corridor I checked earlier, because the stairwell is compromised. That corridor smells worse up close, but I pick the immediate threat over the possible one. I close the stairwell door behind me, and I wedge it with the fire axe handle, jamming it into the push bar so it cannot swing cleanly. I do not believe it will hold forever. I believe it will buy seconds. The corridor is dark. My goggles catch reflections. I keep the hand microphone near my mouth and I whisper, "If you are in a stairwell and it enters, you need a secondary path. If you have a dry chemical extinguisher, use it to break its line of sight and move. Do not stand and fight unless you have no other option." Behind me, the stairwell door shudders once. The axe handle wedge groans, then quiet again. It is listening. It is deciding. Ahead, in the dark corridor, I see glossy streaks on the wall near the ceiling. And the air has that sour organic smell Dr. Rao warned about. Resin. A path. A sign that it has been here already. My skin tightens under the shirt. I stop moving forward because forward is walking under a route it controls. This is where realism takes over. I do not have a clean escape route. The stairwell is compromised. The office floor is contaminated. The outside is burning and full of chemical smoke. The basement is drains. The roof is exposure. So I do the next best thing. I back into a small interior copy room with no windows, concrete on one side, and a solid door. I shut the door. I stack a metal filing cabinet against it, not to stop it, to create noise and friction. I sit on the floor with the portable radio and I keep talking, because that is what I can still do while I'm alive. If this transmission ends suddenly, do not fill the silence with fantasies. Assume I got caught. Assume the building fell. Assume the generator died. Use the information while you have it. Stay away from vents, shafts, tunnels, and drains. Do not join crowds. Do not pick up unknown gear. If you must move, move with a plan and a reason, and understand that the threat learns routes faster than you learn comfort. Luis, if you can hear me, keep your wheelhouse sealed. Renee, if you can hear me, keep your people quiet and keep them away from shafts. Mara, if you are still out there somewhere, I heard you. Dr. Rao, I heard you too, and I am still talking.